Hi guys! It finally happened. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I can't believe this is happening. It's so exciting for me, I'm not gonna lie. So, welcome to my channel. This is Kiera's Corner. I'm in a corner in my room. My name and corner with a K, because interesting and different, right? Kind of what this channel is gonna look like. I know that's the big question here. Kira's Corner is going to be where I get to talk about pop culture things that I really want to talk about. I love pop culture. It's something I try to keep up with, I'm interested in. So this is kind of be the space where I'm going to talk about books, movies, TV, in sports are really going to be the big four, with music thrown in occasionally, and also Broadway. I love me a Broadway show, music. So good. So that's what's happening here. For a first video, this was a hard thing for me to decide what to do because I have a ton of ideas. The topic I decided on doing was the top movies I watched in 2023. I have Letterboxd. I love Letterboxd. I'm going to link it in the description box below. I rank the movies I watch and I review like nonsense that doesn't make any sense. It's like a sentence or two or something. And I was like, I could look back on the year and kind of the movies I'd seen. Now, I've actually filmed something very similar to this, and it was an hour and a half long. And I was like, that's a little too long for my liking. And so instead of going through every single movie I watched in 2023, I decided just to look at the ones that I ranked between a 4 and a 5 star. So if I ranked it 4 stars, it's on this list, 4.5, all the way up to 5. And just talk about those movies. There's 33, so it's still going to be a little bit long, maybe a little bit longer than I would like, but we're going to talk about the movies. I'm going to give like a brief plot and kind of my thoughts on the movie. It's all going to be pretty positive because they're highly ranked. Take these rankings with a grain of salt as well. This is just my like gut instinct after I watch the movie because I tend to log very soon, pretty much right as soon as I finish the movie. So take these rankings with a grain of salt. It is my immediate thoughts, and this is allowing me to kind of look back and see if I would change anything. Great. Awesome. So let's get started with my top movies of 2023. All right. First movie we're going to talk about is so good. We have The Lost City. Okay? The Lost City. I gave it 4.5 stars because I loved it so much. Here's what it's about. We have Loretta. She's an author of romance novels. Kind of think of the cringy covers, the old-timey romance covers, right? Paperbacks, those kind of things. She writes those. And her husband passed away something like 5 years ago. And so it's hard for her to write now. And she just doesn't enjoy it anymore. So add like grieving still over her husband passing. And she often would write about things that were very similar with her and her husband. It's just not going well. And then we have Alan. Now, Alan is the cover model for the character Dash in her novels. It's very clear to start like right away that this guy likes Loretta, but she sees him as nothing more than a dumb model. Now, at a book tour launch thing, Loretta gets kidnapped by, I believe his name is Abigail, but like I don't remember his name. It's Daniel Radcliffe. And he kidnaps her to find this lost city of D that she wrote about in her most recent book. Now, obviously, Alan, being the guy that really, really likes Loretta, decides to follow her and to rescue her. And after that, chaos ensues. It's ridiculousness. Now, this movie is so funny. It gets me every time. I cannot tell you. The first time I watched it, I had a blast. This rewatch, another blast. And I watched it again in the new year with my mom. And I was actually distracted. I was doing something else. And then my mom was watching in the background and I got distracted. And as soon as I was done, I think I was playing a game with my dad. As soon as I finished the game, I went to go watch because I needed to. It's just so funny. It's like keeling over laughter. I mean, the leech scene alone makes this movie a 4-star. Add Oscar Martinez, and every time he's on screen, I'm killing myself. So, there's nothing wrong with Lost City, truly. The chemistry between Sandra Bullock and Channing Tatum is actually really good, which was something I was a little bit worried about when I watched it for the first time. But since I've watched it, I mean, I love it and they're great. Just all the characters are funny. It's a fun time. Highly recommend. That was The Lost City. Next movie. Now, this one I rated 5 stars at the time, but looking back, I would probably give it a 4, maybe a 4.5. And that's Women Talking. So, Women Talking is based on a true story of this isolated Mennonite community where the women and girls have discovered that the men of this colony have actually been using animal tranquilizers in order to subdue and assay them. And they retaliate by attacking them, and the men get arrested and imprisoned in a nearby city for their own protection. They're given 2 days, so this means that the women of the community have to decide together what they're going to do in those 2 days. They either stay and forgive the men, or they leave the colony. Now, this was a very, very deep film. It touched on a lot of hard themes, and it's not an easy watch. At the time, I really loved it. I think looking back on it, I like it a little less. Just through conversations and discussions with other people about the movie has changed my opinion on it. And a lot of it has to do with the Mennonite culture. Now, I'm a Mennonite. I grew up knowing about this, but the women in this colony are in a much more conservative branch, I would say, or just a different way of growing up than I did. So I understand that aspect of it, and a lot of people who have come out of this kind of strict regime almost have said that the accuracy of it, of at least the women in the colony, was not like super accurate. But I understand they took creative license with it. It's still a movie that talks about serious issues and that needed to be discussed. And so in that aspect, I did really like it. And I still do like it. Like I said, I would probably give it a 4 or 5, 4.5 now. I don't think I would give it 5 anymore, but I would recommend Women Talking. This is hard, so look up trigger warnings, because there are some hard stuff in here that could potentially be harmful to someone. So if you're going to watch it, look at content warnings and just figure out if you're going to be able to watch it and actually enjoy it, or just be able to even make it through. So that was Women Talking. Now the next movie is one of those movies where I told you to take these rankings with a grain of salt. Okay? We have Rags, which I gave 4.5 stars. This is a Nickelodeon made-for-TV movie that I grew up on. Me, my sisters, my cousins, we watched this a lot. And it was on in the house a lot. So, this is a Cinderella story retelling, and it's gender flip. So you have Charlie, who's the main character, who is Cinderella in the story. His mom had owned a restaurant, a diner or something called The Palace. And when she passed away, it went to his stepdad and his 2 sons. So he is mistreated, obviously, as Cinderella, by them. He does cleaning for them, doesn't get paid. But what he dreams of doing is being a musician and being an artist. But because he doesn't have connections into the industry or any of the sort, he decides to sing on the street. And this is a great way to get noticed, in theory. And it does. He does get noticed by an engineer. So we have Charlie. And then we have Katie Worth. She is the Prince Charming in this story. And she is a famous musician. And she's kind of struggling with her relationship with herself, and also her relationship with her dad, because of their disagreements about what her music and what her style should be. But they meet in this cute little meet cute, and they grow up a friendship, and it's Cinderella after that. So, of course, I said this rating has a lot of nostalgia attached to it, but I cannot deny that the music in this movie is top notch. So much so that it irks me to know that I can't get the soundtrack anywhere but YouTube. Like, I want it on Spotify so badly, but it's only on YouTube. So I can't listen to it all the freaking time. I can only really listen to it when I'm home or have Wi Fi. That's dumb. But yes, like, is it poorly acted? Parts of it, yes. Like, there's not much you can do with a Nickelodeon made for TV movie, okay? But it's still so good. Music helps. Charlie is such a fun character. I love him. And also, shout out to Avon Jogia, who plays this douchey British musician. But he's so funny. It's. he makes. He steals seats. He's in, truly. Truly. I recommend. That was Rags. Next one, we have Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse. I give it 4.5 stars. I remember when I saw it for the first time and being amazed. Now, in case you don't know, this is a Spider-Man movie, as you could not tell, I'm sure. So we have Miles Morales, who is this mixed kid. He's part black and part Hispanic. And he has a strained relationship, I would think, kind of with his dad, but he's super smart. His parents send him to this super smart school, and he doesn't really fit in there. He much rather would prefer hanging out with kids in Brooklyn, where he's from, and also his uncle. Now, one night when he's spending time with his uncle, he gets bitten by a radioactive spider because it's a Spider-Man story. And later on that evening, he watches the Peter Parker Spider-Man die. Now, after Peter's death, and after Spider-Man is revealed to be Peter Parker to the world, weird things start happening. He has a new girl show up at his school, and then he meets Peter B. Parker. And this is when he realizes that there are Spider-Men from other universes coming into his. So we have Peter B. Parker, who obviously Spider-Man. We have Gwen Stacy as Spider-Gwen. We have Spider-Pig, Spider-Noir. And then Penny Parker, I think is what her name is. And she has this robot, this giant robot that has a spider living in it, and it's kind of cool. And it's a Spider-Man story after that. The big bad, I'm sure the big bad is Kingpin, and he has his whole little story. But overall, top notch. This was so different from anything we had seen at this point. Like, the animation was so new and exciting. I remember when the time came out, and I still love the animation so much. This movie actually really caught my eye with animation, so much so that when animated movies come out now, I really try to pick up on the differences in animation, or if it's a different style, and that can really draw me into a movie. And so that really helped with this. The music was so good. The soundtrack I have downloaded, like, it just all the vibes were so good with this movie, and it's funny. I just love it. It's so good. It's top 5 Spider-Man movie of all time, in my opinion. Like, and that's including every single live action. This is a top 5, 100%. Like, it's just so good, and it deserves all of the hype that it gets. That is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Would highly recommend. The next one is the sequel. We have Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. This came out this summer. I saw it with my sister in theaters, and I gave it 4.5 stars again. This was the sequel, as I said. This one, I think, takes place a year or maybe a couple of months after the first one. And we get to dive into Gwen's character a lot in this one, and that's super fun. And we get to see a bunch of new Spider-Man, which is always a plus. And the reason we get to meet a bunch of these new Spider-Man is because we are introduced to the Spider Society, which is kind of run by Miguel O'Hara, or Spider-Man 2099. It's interesting because, again, it's a Spider-Man story, but it's it's almost a bigger scale. It's definitely a bigger scale than the first one was. And it just delivers. It delivers every time. So this was another banger. Like, there's no denying that this was as good as the first one. The music again. Metro. So good. I have that whole soundtrack again. Like, I listen to that stuff often. My favorite part, because again, animation girly here now. My favorite part of this movie was going into the different universes and seeing the different animation styles. Like, we kind of saw that with how the different Spider-Men were drawn in the first one, but with this one we are introduced to worlds. And so like Gwen's world was super fun. Well, not fun. It was a cool vibe, and the way that they animated it was super cool. And then you had Spider-Punk's world and him himself. That was super cool with this hard, harsh animation. And then we had Paviter, who was the funniest Spider-Man of all time, and his world was a different animation, and it all was just so good. And it was just, I can't get enough of this world. I'm so bummed that the third one got delayed, but I will be seeing it in theaters when it comes out, because it deserves to be seen in theaters. Spider-Man Across the Spiderverse. Again, if you've seen the first one, you gotta watch the second one. The next one was a fun surprise. I was not expecting to like this one so much, and that is the map of tiny perfect things. This I gave 4.5 stars, and it was such a delightful surprise. I was not expecting it to like it, or to be as good as it was. So, Map of Tiny Perfect Things follows Mark, who is this very content teen living in a time loop. He's very okay with living in this time loop and just making the best of this day that keeps repeating. Everything seems fine and normal in his time loop way, but something happens that is different from every single day that he's lived, and it's Margaret, the girl that he meets. And he finds out that she's also stuck in this time loop. And so they come together and they decide to make a map of the tiny perfect things that they find throughout their day in this town, in this time loop. And they just get to spend more and more time together. Maybe something more gross. No spoilers. But overall, this was just a fun way to do a time loop movie. This genre can get really, really repetitive, I think. And they just did such a good job with this. Mark and Margaret's chemistry was so good. I was rooting for them the whole time. And just honestly, I just had a blast while watching it. And that's so good to have had such a blast with something I wasn't expecting. Like, I went into this not knowing what it was. I went into this with no expectations and came out very, very happy that I had watched it and very intrigued by the whole thing. It was just really good. And I can't talk about this enough. Map of Tiny Perfect Things, definitely watch. It was so good. To follow up Map of Tiny Perfect Things, we have another time loop movie in Palm Springs. I gave this one 4.5 stars as well. I kind of went through a little time loop section in life. So this one follows Niles, who's living in the time loop. And this day that he keeps repeating is a wedding. And one night he saves Sarah, the main love interest, from this disastrous toast that she's giving because she's the maid of honor and she is drunk on champagne. And he saves her from this disastrous speech, ends up following him, and she gets stuck in the same time loop. She's not originally in this time loop. She's one of the people just living each day, not realizing it's been repeated. So she gets stuck in the same time loop now. And so they come together, they work together she's very set on needing a way out of this time loop. And so she decides that they're going to work together to find a way to get out of this time loop. Twists and turns and just occur, because who wouldn't love a twist and a turn? So again, this was another fun time loop movie. The chemistry between the two of them was really, really good. And Andy Samberg's not playing like a traditional comedic role, which is really fun. In a lot of ways, Niles feels very similar to Jake Peralta from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and he plays those characters really well. But Niles is a little more grounded, I would say, almost than Jake. I don't know, like it, not grounded per se, but still just like it's different than Jake. But it was again a fun time loop movie that I went in not knowing anything about, just thinking it was a rom-com, and coming out very surprised and happy I had watched it. So that was Palm Springs. Movie number 8 is Interstellar. I gave this one 4.5 stars. I had waited such a long time to watch this movie. I went in not knowing what it was about. All I knew that Christopher Nolan did it, and so I knew it was going to be great. So here's what Interstellar is very, very, very briefly about, because it's a Christopher Nolan movie, so it's hard to understand on a first watch. And I haven't rewatched it since, and I probably should. So, in the future, crop blight has caused the earth and the people living on it to become a failing farming world and a way of life. There's also all of these scientific thoughts that are like, they faked the Apollo 11 moon landing, and our main guy, Cooper, hates this because he was a former NASA pilot, I think it was. And so he teaches his kids that the stuff they're getting taught at school is a lie. Now, his daughter Murphy believes that her room is haunted because she saw a book fall out of her shelf or something along those lines. But it actually ends up being an intelligent being sending binary coordinates to them. And so then Cooper goes into a wormhole after meeting with some people at NASA because he's told that a way to save the Earth and all the people on it is to go into this wormhole. And you get stuck there. You get stuck in space. It's like his journey through space, and it's a lot. So, thoughts on this? It was amazing. Obviously, I gave it 4.5 stars. I still agree with that. I don't understand why I waited so long. This sat in my watch list for so long, and I don't understand why I didn't watch it sooner. It was heartbreaking and heartwarming at the same time, which I think can be hard to do. But like Cooper's character was so good, and you just felt him struggle while he's in space and having to deal with not being with his kids and not watching his kids grow up and stuff like that. And so that was so good. Anne Hathaway did a great job in this movie. It was just overall, like, this movie was so good. Of course, it's Christopher Nolan, so it's hard to understand, and only he could come up with something like this. But overall, this movie was amazing, and I can't tell people enough to watch this movie, okay? It is one of my favorite Chris Nolan movies, which is saying a lot because I loved Inception and I love The Prestige and the Dark Knight trilogy. I love it. So this being so far up is impressive for myself, but all this to say, you should watch Interstellar. It is amazing. Next up, we have The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I gave this 4.5 stars, and this is a shocking one to see how high I rated it, even though I saw it not that long ago. Like a couple of months, I think, is when I saw it. But I thought it was really good. All right, overview of what Songbirds and Snakes is about. This is a prequel to the Hunger Games movies and books where we follow Coriolanus Snow, also known as President Snow, also known as one of the worst human beings in Panem. We follow him as a teenager / young adult, kind of, as he is in the first batch of mentors for the Hunger Games. So it's the 10th Hunger Games. They had never had mentors before, and this was in an effort to get more people in the Capitol watching the Hunger Games, because at this point, a lot of people didn't watch it. And so the mentors were there to help these essentially performers kind of get to know the capital people, and that the capital people will get to really care about them in order for them to actually watch the games. So Snow gets the female tribute of District 12, and her name is Lucy Gray Baird. She is a handful. She is feisty and she sings. Okay? If people get mad that this was kind of a musical, they need to stop. Okay? She sang in the trailer. I'm almost positive. Am I lying to myself? She may not have sang in the trailer. But anyway, that's kind of big for her character, is that she sings. So in this movie, we just watch Snow and his relationship with Lucy, and we see him evolve and develop into the guy we start to recognize as President Snow in the Hunger Games. Thoughts? I thought it was so good. Before I rated it, I think I had to double check on what I had rated Hunger Games and Catching Fire, because I was like, it's not better than for sure Catching Fire, but I was like, it could maybe be better than Hunger Games in my opinion. But to be fair, it's been a while since I watched them. I didn't do a rewatch before going into Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, but it is the same rating as Catching Fire. Will this change in the next couple of months? Who knows? But I also went into it not remembering a ton about the book. I read the book in like height of COVID, and so I was stuck in my house and didn't have anything better to do. And so I didn't remember that much about the book. I've since remembered a lot because of TikTok. But I think that maybe helped Snow's character. Oh, Tom Blythe did such a good job with him. He really like fully embraces that TikTok sound. It's like, he's the best guy around. What about what murder? That's what I think of every time I think of Snow, because he is very charming and he's very charismatic, and he goes on to do terrible, terrible things. And I keep having to remind myself of this when I'm watching this movie. Soundtrack, so good. I have it downloaded pretty much all of December. I was listening to it. So luckily that's not on Spotify Wrapped. I think it's hard to say whether you would need to watch Hunger Games before watching Songbirds and Snakes. I don't think you need to, but it's probably more interesting watching Hunger Games and then going back to Songbirds and Snakes and seeing the parallels and just like the development of it all. So yes, that was Hunger Games, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. We now get into my 4 stars, okay? We've covered all of my 4.5s now. We now enter my 4-star range for this year. First up, The Princess Bride. If you haven't seen this movie, what are you doing? It has been out came out in the 80s. It's like 40s. It's like late 30-year-old movie. So get on it, folks. In case you haven't seen it and have no idea what I'm talking about, here's the plot. So we have Buttercup, and she falls in love with a farm boy named Wesley. And she ends up being very, very heartbroken when he is declared dead after he left, can't remember why, but he was at sea, and his boat got attacked by the Dread Pirate Roberts. And she's very, very distraught. She's like, I'm never gonna love again. Fast forward a couple of years, and she's engaged to Prince Humperdinck. However, it's not really by choice. She doesn't love him. It's more of a duty kind of thing to the people. But we have adventures and ridiculousness that follow. Some of this is a classic. And there are rumors of a musical version of this being made. And if those are true, they have to be so careful, because if they even mess this up one bit, people are gonna come at them, because this is so good. Like, it is so quotable. Like, if I think about some of the best lines from this movie, almost none of them are said by Buttercup or even Humperdinck. A lot of them are done by Inigo and, oh no, the Sicilian. what's his name? Oh no, I don't remember his name, but it's a Sicilian, and then Andre the Giant, like, and then Wesley as well. He gets some really good lines. This movie's just so good. I grew up on this as well. Um, it's just it's a classic. It's nostalgic. It's a fun time. It's got a little bit of everything. It's got action. It's got adventure. It's got romance. Princess Bride. What else can I say? Next, we have Big Hero 6. That's right, folks. This movie, so good. Another 4 star. And here's a little bit about it. So we follow Hero, who is this young kid who's super duper smart, graduated high school when he was like 14 or something, but he's kind of rebellious or troublesome as he gets into robot fighting, which is technically illegal in his town of San Francisco. Now, his older brother Tadashi gets him out of this kind of and decides to bring him to this science school that Tadashi attends. And so Hiro meets all of his friends here, and Hiro gets to see kind of like the work that all of these people are doing, including Tadashi's project, Baymax, which is a healthcare companion. It's a robot, basically, that helps with healthcare and just your well being. Now, Hiro decides after this that he has to go to this science, has to go to this school. Like, he doesn't have a choice. He's gonna explode if he doesn't go. And so he creates these microbots to showcase at this basically a science fair. But if you showcase something and the school professors and stuff really like your stuff, you can get invited to attend the school. And so he does. People love his microbots. It's just everything seems to be going so well. But then a fire starts and everyone is evacuating, and Tadashi realizes that one of his professors and pretty much his mentor or kind of idol is in the building and decides he has to go save him. And unfortunately, Tadashi dies in this fire because of an explosion that occurred in the building. So Hiro is depressed, very depressed, doesn't go to school for a while, when all of a sudden he finds out that Baymax is actually in his house. And so Baymax's whole thing is he needs to help Hiro feel better. And so they decide they work together along with the help of Tadashi's friends. They all work together to make Hiro feel better, which is solving this mystery that actually ends up coming into it's a really big deal. Now, this movie is so good. I love this movie. It is one of my favorite Disney animated movies, and I can't, like, I'm not lying. That like this movie just I love it so much. Why did Tadashi have to die? We could have got more Tadashi. Like, we really could have. The little we got of him, he's beloved, and I understand why. The twists in this movie, great. I remember being very young when I watched this for the first time and being very shocked and being like, oh my gosh, was not expecting that. The characters are all fun. They all have this fun dynamic. It's just such a good time. And it's so like family friendly, but it touches on like hard issues of grieving and just it's so good. It's so good. If you've been living under a rock and haven't seen Big Hero 6, please go see it. You are going to love it. It's not going to be a waste of your time. Promise. Next up, Step Up to the Streets. Okay, remember, take these with a grain of salt. This is not even a nostalgia movie speaking. This is just pure love. Okay? So this is the sequel to Step Up, which is a dance movie. So this means that Step Up 2 is also a dance movie. Follow Andy, who lives in, I believe it's Baltimore, I think is where the movie takes place. And her mom is dead. We don't know about her dad. And she lives with her mom's best friend in Baltimore, but she gets into a little bit of trouble. And so her guardian is like, I've had enough. You are going to go live with your aunt in Texas. And this is a big deal for her because she is part of a dance troupe called, it's numbers, 6 something 9, I think. But anyways, this is a big deal. And she's like, no, I need to stay in Baltimore. Like, please, please, please. She goes out to a dance club where she battles, what's his name? It's Channing Tatum. It's his Tyler. Tyler from the first Step Up. And he's like, if you win, blah, blah, blah. If I win, you're going to try out for MSA or the Maryland School of the Arts, which is the big school, the same school as from the first one. She loses. She finds out that Tyler made a deal with her guardian. If she gets into MSA, she can stay. So she goes to try out. Trial goes terribly, but she manages to get in. And this is where we are introduced to a bunch of other characters. Truly, she meets Chase properly for the first time, and she meets the best character ever, Moose. During this time, she gets kicked out of the dance troupe that she's in, and Chase convinces her to create a dance troupe with students from MSA so that they can compete in the streets, which is a big dance like competition for basically territory in Baltimore. So that is Step Up 2. This may have the best dance scene in the entire series, and of course I mean that finale dance scene in the rain. Go look it up. If you don't want to watch the whole movie, that's fine. Just go look up this dance scene. It's insane. The characters, what we get of them is fun. A bunch of these characters also show up throughout the series. Moose shows up in all of them after this. He's in 2, 3, 4, and 5. And 4, he's more of a cameo in 4. But like a lot of these characters we see throughout, and that's really fun. The dancing is great. Is the acting that good? No. No, it's not. But you know what? I'm okay with it. I'm okay with some crappy acting sometimes, and this is one of those times, okay? Chase, I remember when I watched this for the first time being like, Chase looks really, really familiar. Who is this guy? And of course, naturally, I went and looked it up. He is the douchey ex-boyfriend in She's the Man. Like, what? Found out he could dance and was struck with awe. Anyways, best dance scene. The dances are really fun. Characters fun. I love this movie. It might be my favorite of the bunch. It might be a favorite. That was Step Up 2, The Streets. Next movie we have is the live-action Little Mermaid. Another 4 stars. This is literally just The Little Mermaid with a couple of changes here. So I'm not even going to bother with the plot because if you haven't seen the animated Little Mermaid, what are you doing? It is a classic and it's great. I remember loving it. And I still love it. It's so good. I saw the hate it was getting and I didn't understand why because everything was so good. My favorite thing was when the actress who played like Pretty Ursula was singing and everyone's like, why didn't they get her to play Ariel? Everybody, like, do you not realize that's Halle Bailey's voice? Do you not understand? I was just like shocked by that and be like, wow, people are going through a lot of lengths to diss on Halle Bailey's performance. Halle Bailey did so well. Her Ariel is so good. She conveyed so much without speaking. It was so good. But maybe my favorite part of this whole movie was Eric. His character and the changes they made were huge improvements because we were able to understand him a little bit more and he didn't feel nearly as creepy. I mean, it was just so good. The new music, I loved all of the new songs. Wild Uncharted Waters, though, it may have been my top song played on this year. When I saw it on my Spotify Wrapped, I was like, whoop. Like, yeah, this was so good. People need to stop hating on it. Oh, live action Little Mermaid. So good. Number 14 is Miss Congeniality. That's right. I watched another Sandra Bullock movie because Sandra Bullock is amazing. Miss Congeniality is a movie about pageantry. It follows the Miss America pageant, kind of, So we have Gracie Hart, who is an FBI agent, who is a big tomboy. Like, when I mean big tomboy, I mean she's never worn heels. She's probably, like, her wearing a dress, you would never caught her dead in that. She doesn't wear makeup. Her hair is like never brushed. It's always in a ponytail. Like, this is the kind of tomboy we're talking about. And she kind of makes a big mistake in a mission, and she's kind of put on probation. After that, we are introduced to Eric Matthews, who is another FBI agent, and he's on a case where the Miss America pageant had gotten basically a bomb threat. There was this everyone thought it was a certain different terrorist organization, and so he asks Gracie, because he's been given permission by the head FBI guy, to let her be an undercover agent, and she is so against it. She's like, I could never do this. This is ridiculous. Like, if all they care about is looking super pretty, they're not smart, and all they care about is world peace. Okay? She's very very anti-pageant. But she decides to do it, and throughout the movie, she connects with the girls. She just learns about all this stuff. And it's a happy ending. I'll give you that. So this is so funny. Again, Sandra Bullock plays pretty similar characters, I think, in most of the movies I've seen her in, and which is kind of like this grumpy, very no nonsense kind of girl who then loosens up throughout the movie. And this is no exception. She does such a good job. We forget about the second one because it ruins everything, including the ending, which I love. So the second one doesn't exist. What second one? I don't know what you're talking about. Honestly, the best thing to come out of this movie was that there was a question in one of the rounds that one of the girls was asked, and it was, what would you say is the perfect date? And she goes, I would say April 25th, because it's not too hot and it's not too cold. And I think that sums up all I need to. So just like Mean Girls has October 3rd, Miss Congeniality has April 25th. It's a shame, really, I didn't watch this on April 25th. I'm going to have to make this a year-round thing where every April 25th, I watch Miss Congeniality. Because this movie is so good. Okay? Watch it. Please. Watch Miss Congeniality. Miss Congeniality. Next up, Mamma Mia. Classic, childhood favorite, nostalgia. 4 stars. This is based on a Broadway musical that is pretty much based off of the songs of ABBA. All of the songs are ABBA songs. So it is a jukebox musical, which I know not everybody loves, but they're very popular right now. Anyways, ABBA songs. So the check mark, ABBA songs. This is about Sophie, who is engaged, and she doesn't know who her dad is. But she and her mom won't talk about her dad either. So she does some snooping, and she finds her mom's diary that she kept the year she was pregnant with Sophie, and realizes that there are 3 possible men who could be her father. We have Sam Carmichael, Billy Anderson, and Harry Bright. She invites all 3 of them to the wedding, which is just insane, and they all say yes because she sends them as if she were Donna, her mom. Now they all come. She's like, my mom can't find out. This is a surprise for her. So they're like, fine, whatever. But then Donna finds out, and she freaks out. And so this follows all of the reckless craziness that happens, because you have these men who have no idea about Sophie, who have had a past with Donna, and Donna having to deal with a wedding and a daughter who's 20 who's getting married that she thinks is so crazy, and these men that she hasn't seen in 20 years. Like, when I tell you this is so good, I mean it. I truly love this movie so much. I remember watching it from a very young age, probably until I was like 8 or 9, and then not being allowed to watch it because finally I was going to realize some stuff in this that I shouldn't have seen when I was 8. Thank you, Mom, for that. But I remember watching it again for the first time when I was like 12, 13 maybe, and being like, oh, there are things I missed here. But it's fine because it's still so good. Singing wise, slaps. Pretty much every song. I don't care if everyone knows that Pierce Brosnan can't really sing. I will hype him up all he wants because I don't hate him singing. Sure, there's a bunch of auto-tune on his voice. I just couldn't care less really because I can't really see anyone else as Sam. So, yeah. And let's not lie. We all may think Lay All Your Love on Me is cringy and hard to watch. That is perfection. And they ate. So, Mamma Mia, please watch it and enjoy the musical ridiculousness and the prettiness of Greece. Next movie is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. This one was one of the better Marvel movies to come out in the last couple of years, which is just crazy because they've had quite a few movies come out in the last couple of years, and this one was one of the better ones. Clearly, because they gave it 4 stars. Because at the end of Infinity War and Endgame, spoiler alerts if you haven't seen those, but literally it's been 5 years, Gamora died in Infinity War, and then in Endgame, we have 2014 Gamora, who has never met the Guardians. So Peter Quill / Star-Lord is trying to figure out kind of what that looks like. But in a fight with Adam Warlock, Rocket gets injured. The only way to help Rocket is if the Guardians go seek out the High Evolutionary, who pretty much created Rocket, and he's the one that made all of the changes to Rocket. They go after the High Evolutionary. We get to learn a lot through flashbacks of Rockets. We learn in just like the stuff that he went through and his friends that died, unfortunately. I do not think that a raccoon could make me feel so many things. This was a really heart-tugging movie. It's probably the best of the Guardians bunch, probably. The first one is really good, don't get me wrong, but this maybe is my favorite. And it was just a really great end to the Guardians story. They each of the Guardians has their own little happy ending, and it fits all of their characters really well. So I was really happy with this movie. I felt a lot of things. Rocket, his story is so rough, but to see him go through it and then find a family again, it's very found family, super found family based, but so good. Guardians 3, please, if you're gonna watch Guardians 3, do watch like a bunch of other Marvel movies. It's hard to watch Marvel when you haven't seen a bunch of them. So even if you watch like the first 2 Guardians and then the last 2 Avengers movies to get to this, I think you're pretty set. That's Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Next is the Duff. Another one where rating is a little weird, okay? Don't mind me. So the Duff follows Bianca, who is I believe she's a senior in high school. And the plot really starts when her and her friends go to a party and Wesley, her next door neighbor, calls her a Duff. And she's like, what did you call me? And he's like, designated ugly fat friend. Obviously, no one wants to be called a Duff. And he's like, it's not a big deal. And Bianca takes this very seriously. This sends her into a tailspin and basically an identity crisis. And this had happened on a Friday, I want to say. So all through the weekend, she is like spiraling and all this and that. And she gets to school on Monday, super mad at her friends for hiding this knowledge from her that she was their Duff, and pushes them away. Now, she has a crush on this guy named Toby, who is an interesting fellow, to say the least. And she decides that she needs to make herself not be a Duff in order to catch Toby's attention. So she makes a deal with Wesley. She will help him pass chemistry if he helps her basically change things so she's not a Duff anymore. And that Toby will want to go out with her, and that guys will want to go out with her and not just try to get information on her friends. This movie is so good. There are problems for sure, and it can get, like, it is kind of raunchy, but it's still such a fun time for me. Robbie Amell gets a pass for not looking like he's in high school at all because he's pretty, and gets extra points for that. So I love it. Allison Janney, like she's in some of my favorite movies. She's in that and 10 Things I Hate About You, where she plays that awesome guidance counselor who's off her rocker. And like it's just so good. I really love the Duff. Watch it for sure. You will not be disappointed. Next one, Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again, the sequel, another 4-star. So this one takes place a couple of years after the first Mamma Mia, and Donna has passed away, and Sophie has redone the hotel that her mom owned. So she has a bunch of family and friends coming for the grand opening, and all throughout that and her dealing with that and her dealing with Sky and all sorts of other things, she and the audience learn all about Donna's past with Sam, Bill, and Harry through flashbacks. It's pretty much all I'm going to give you for that one, for sure. So another super fun. These are all ABBA songs again. So some of them are repeats, like we got Dancing Queen and obviously Mamma Mia, which are both repeats from the first movie, but we also get a ton of ABBA songs we hadn't heard before from the first one. So it was super fun just to hear more ABBA and just get to see young Donna, Sam, Bill, and Harry. The younger casting was so good, including Rosie and Tanya's casting. Oh, it's all just so good and has me cackling when I watch it, truly. So if you've seen the first Mamma Mia and loved it, watch the second one. If you watched the first Mamma Mia, didn't love it, watch the second one. But yeah, get to see more pretty Grease. You can't go wrong with the scenery of these movies and the music. It just makes you want to smile and dance along. So that was Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again. Next up, we have Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. So a little background for this. My sister decided that she was going to watch all of the Indiana Jones movies with my dad and myself because the 5th one was coming out. So we watched them together. This is the 3rd one. It's my favorite of the bunch. The only one I gave 4 stars. Okay? Okay, here's the plot. Indiana is approached by an art collector, basically, asking him to find the Holy Grail. He does say yes eventually, but he also finds out that there has been an archaeologist who's gone missing looking for the Grail. Turns out it's Indy's dad, Henry, and they actually bump into each other on this little adventure and search for the Grail together, which is a lot harder than they both originally thought it was going to be. So that's all I'm getting with that. These are very slim pickings, like barely anything on the bone kind of plot overviews for the most part, and that's because I'm afraid I'm going to spoil something. We just move on. This was my favorite of the bunch. I thought it was the funniest of the bunch, and because I thought it was the funniest, it then meant that it was the best. Sean Connery plays Henry, Indiana's dad. Loved that edition. That was super fun. And I remember having a good time watching this one. I had fun with the other ones too, don't get me wrong, but this one I just remember laughing a lot more. So Indiana Jones is a classic series for sure. I've heard the 5th one is terrible. It will get watched eventually because I need to finish the series. But Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, definitely would recommend, even if you don't watch anything past that. But for sure, watch the first 2 and then Last Crusade. Okay, great. Next one. Next one is another adaptation of a Broadway musical, and that is In the Heights. So this is a musical written by Lin-Manuel Miranda, and it's very clear because you can sense his style all over the place. So we follow Uznavi from the Dominican Republic, but lives in Washington Heights in New York. And we basically follow him and other members of the community during, I think, the hottest week that's on record for them. Very hot, and it goes on from there. Music is so fun. It's a very large cast, which makes sense. It's a Broadway musical, and Broadway shows generally have a larger cast. But each of them has their own plot, but it doesn't feel choppy, which some big ensemble movies can feel, especially if there's a bunch of different plots going on. It doesn't feel choppy. It was just fun. The music was super catchy and vibey. The dance scenes and songs, like, it felt so good. It's hard to put Broadway shows into a movie just simply because of space and because of a time restraint, but it was so good. They did such a good job. Shout out to John M. Chu, who, by the way, also did some of the step ups, just so you know. He did a great job with that. The cast was great. All of it was just super fun. There was fun little cameos and just like Easter eggs. That was also very exciting for me. So if you don't like Broadway, this is not going to be your vibe. This is very Broadway heavy and you can feel it. But if you enjoy In the Heights, even if you don't know what it is, if you're interested in learning what it is, check it out. Definitely recommend. It's another 4 stars, and you will end up jamming and downloading the soundtrack like I have. So that's In the Heights. Next up, we have Barbie. I watched this in theaters, and I gave it a 4 stars. So if you haven't watched the trailer or you've been living under a rock and haven't seen this, what are you doing? But basically, Barbie's got it good in Barbie Land. You know, she's the main girly, she's living life, but something happens where she then has to go into the real world, and this is a big deal. Ken decides to tag along because he can go nowhere without Barbie, and he is literally no one if Barbie's not around. He goes along, and it's craziness, truly, okay? Now, it's pretty overt in its messaging and its feminist energy. But apart from that, it's hilarious. It's so funny to me because I found that the Kens were the best part of the movie, which is maybe ironic given that this is a super feminist heavy, female empowerment heavy movie. But I was living for the Kens. I'm just like, did I get something out of this like I was supposed to? You know? The look of this movie was also so good. The pink and the bright colors in general, and just like the shininess, made like the plastic just added to this aesthetic and the atmosphere of Barbie Land, and I loved it. I thought it really, really helped the movie for sure. I'm Just Ken, such a good song. I Want to Push You Around, that was a great cover. But yeah, Barbie was so good. I was laughing. I was having a fun time. Overall, would recommend Barbie. Go in knowing that it is a pretty, it's heavy-handed in its messaging. If you go in knowing that, I think you might enjoy it better. But yeah, Barbie, 4 stars, was a win from me. We got another fun animation style movie. We have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem, another 4 stars. And it's one of many Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movies, but here's the specific plot. So obviously, this is well known. The turtles have been raised by Splinter the Rat in the sewers their whole lives. And Splinter tells them that they only go above and out of the sewer to collect supplies and materials and things for them in the sewers, but they are naturally curious because they are teenagers, okay? Then one night they meet April, who is basically their main connection to the upper world, I guess, after her moped is stolen. And the 5 of them end up working together and solving the mystery of Superfly and fighting Superfly, who is the villain of this movie. This was, like I said, it's another cool animation style. That was one of the first things that caught my attention when I watched the trailer, and I was like, that looks cool. I want to see that. Even if the plot doesn't interest me, right now the animation is really keeping me interested. The turtles were played by teenagers, and you can tell, and I loved it. They gave such brother vibes, and I later found out that I think that the 4 of them tended to record together, which is not common in animated movies, but I think is really, really helpful in the sense of that these brothers, they are all they know. They have put up with each other, they lived with each other, they love each other and care about each other. And doing that separately is a little bit harder to do, but when you're constantly with these people, that definitely helps in that dynamic, which is great. So when I was watching the movie, I remember being like, oh, that voice is familiar. Oh, that voice is familiar. this cast is like low-key stacked for a TMNT animated movie. Like, way to go, Seth Rogen, for getting all these people to do this movie. You clearly, your friends will do anything that you do. Like, I don't know, but this movie is low-key stacked. It's just so good. It's a fun one. It's super family friendly. I saw it with my sister, and we had a blast. We truly had a lot of fun with it. So, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutant Mayhem, would definitely recommend. The next one I also saw with my sister in theaters, and that was Blue Beetle. So me and my sister watched the animated series Young Justice when I was on Netflix once upon a time, and we love it. Blue Beetle was one of her favorite characters to come out of the show, and so she was super stoked for this movie, and so was I. I had seen the trailer. Mainly, I was super stoked because of Xolo Maridueña, who I watched on Cobra Kai, and I freaking love Cobra Kai. So I was really excited to see him do a superhero movie. So Blue Beetle is about Jaime Reyes. Now, he comes home after graduating from college, and through some events, he ends up in possession of a blue scarab that had been found by some people up north, I think, and had gotten sent to Victoria Court, who's our big bad. This blue scarab bonds with him, basically, and allows him to transform into the Blue Beetle. Now, Victoria needs this scarab for her villainous plan, because that's what villains do, and she chases him to get it, but through the help of Victoria's niece and a couple of other characters, I think, he learned kind of what it's like to be a hero, how to be one, and how to work with the scarab instead of against it. It's just a super fun movie. It, in my mind, it's the Latinx version of Black Panther. Like, pretty much this entire cast is of Hispanic background. It just was so cool. I loved seeing that. And I wish this movie got more love. It doesn't get as much love as I think that it deserves, which is really, really sad for me, especially when the performances were actually really good, in my opinion. Like, Xolo did such a good job. He was an awesome Jaime. After watching this, I don't know who else could play Jaime. He did such a good job. But yeah, had a blast. Sister loved it. It was just fun getting to bond with my sister that way and seeing a superhero movie because it had been a while. So, Blue Beetle, 4 stars, would recommend. And the next one, 10 Things I Hate About You. This is one of my favorite teen rom-coms of all time. And if you haven't seen it, what are you doing? Go watch it. But in case you really don't want to know or really don't care to watch it, I'll give you a brief overview and you can look it up yourself after that. So, Kat Stratford is our main girly, and she is basically known as the shrew at school and is either hated or terrifying. So everyone at school either hates her or is scared of her. There's really no in between. Now, because of this, she's a bit of like, just kind of like an outcast slash doesn't want to be friends with anybody. And so her dad comes up with the idea that her younger sister Bianca can't date until Kat does because he is terrified of them dating someone and getting pregnant because he is an OBGYN. And he himself, he is elbows deep in placenta all the time. His quote, not mine. Now, Cameron is a new kid and has a really big crush on Bianca. And with help from Michael, one of the guys he befriends, they recruit Patrick to go out with Kat so that Cameron can date Bianca. All sorts of things happen. We get to learn about Kat's backstory a little bit. We get to learn about Patrick. We see Bianca's character evolve. All of the good things. One of my favorites of all time, as I said before. I love everything about this movie. And I'm so glad that Joseph Gordon-Levitt has come to love this movie because he said so himself that he used to not be happy that he did this movie. And that's insane to me because this movie was so good. And it did so well right off the bat. But you know what? He's come to his senses now. Heath Ledger, rest in peace. He did such a good job. Yeah. 10 Things I Hate About You. So, so, so good. And as I mentioned before, Allison Janney's in it. She's great. She's an off her rocker guidance counselor who doesn't help anything. 10 Things I Hate About You. Go watch it. I did end up watching Oppenheimer, so I did the Barbenheimer thing, I think I did it like 2 months difference instead of the same thing. But Oppenheimer, I gave it 4 stars. So Oppenheimer follows the real life story of Robert Oppenheimer, who is one of the people who helped create. He's basically the big name behind the creation of the atomic bomb, and it pretty much just follows his life from where does it start? Basically, him being in college all the way to late in life, and it really deals with his own feelings about what his involvement with Hiroshima and the Nagasaki bombings were, and just that aspect of this inner turmoil almost. So this was a really good movie as well. Chris Nolan does it again, you know. I don't think I loved it as much as a ton of people did. That's not to say that it's not a good movie, because it is a very, very good movie. The sound design alone makes this a 4 stars. Like, they knew what to do with sound so well, and it deserves the Oscar. If it doesn't get the sound design Oscar, I don't know what the Academy is thinking. Okay? So good. Emily Blunt did such a good job with her character too. It was fun to see Florence Pugh. Just, this was a stacked cast. It was interesting to see a bunch of people who I would never have pictured kind of in these kinds of roles, that I'm just like, this is a really good movie, and I do recommend watching it. Again, I didn't know about Robert Oppenheimer before I went in, so this was kind of my introduction to his life. And so I don't know how accurate it was, but I mean, it was still really good, and I would recommend. That was Oppenheimer. This movie is one of my new favorites, and that is Good Will Hunting. This is another 4 stars. This is a classic, and I see why. So this follows Will, and he is this super smart kid, but is poor, and so he doesn't go to school. Instead, he is a janitor at, I believe it's MIT, and he sees a problem that one of the profs had put on a board for his students to solve, and Will solves it himself. When the professor finds out that it was Will who did this and not one of his students, he begins to work with him to help solve this crazy problem. It's giving, like, oh no, what's that movie? I cry every time. It's that Chris Evans movie with McKenna Grace or something. That movie. Like, she had to solve this unsolvable problem. That kind of problem, I think, is what this professor is working with Will. Now, Will has a ton of issues and is hard to work with, so he's forced to see a therapist who he connects with and just helps to figure himself out in his own things. His love interest, Skylar, also helps as well. But it was, overall, this movie was just so good. Robin Williams killed it, and his character is not inherently comedic. Like, Robin Williams does a really, really good job with this, and he inserts little bits of comedy in it, but it's so different to what I've seen him in before, where I've seen him just do a lot of comedies, and this isn't it. This isn't a comedy, this is a drama, and he does a really, really good job. Matt Damon does a good job. Minnie Driver did a good job. The whole cast was great in this movie, and it was honestly a delightful surprise. I went into this not knowing a lot about it, knowing it was a really good movie and that people loved it. And so I had high hopes, and they matched it, and I was really excited about that. This is it's a new favorite. Please see Good Will Hunting. So, so, so good. Next, we have another Matt Damon movie, Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron. I don't think I pronounced that right, but it is what it is. I gave it 4 stars. This follows Spirit, who is a wild Mustang who ends up being separated from his herd after protecting them from, I believe it's poachers, or basically the U.S. Army, I think. And the whole movie is just basically him trying to get back to his herd, with a couple of stops along the way, I would say. This was beautiful. Another DreamWorks animation just killing the game. DreamWorks really knows how to do animated movies, truly. This horse never spoke once. The only times we kind of heard him speak were when Matt Damon was voicing his thoughts, and we didn't even get that all the time. But this horse had me hooked. I was genuinely very concerned a lot of the times about Spirit's well-being and if he was going to make it. Like, I was so invested into this horse that didn't speak, and that's insane to me. So good. I just, I understand why people love this movie now. Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron, recommend. Then we watched The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. Again, 4 stars. This one was on my list for a while because I had seen a bunch of clips from when Pedro Pascal had hosted SNL and thought it was hilarious and was told this movie was really, really good. And it was. So this is, how do you even go about this? Nicolas Cage plays a fictionalized version named Nick Cage, who is an actor but is in a lull. He's just not getting roles that he's excited about. He's not being offered roles and is kind of stuck in this auditioning phase again in his life and is kind of broke. So he takes a gig to visit a fan on his birthday for $1 million. Now he ends up being recruited by the CIA when he's there because they believe that Javi, who is the guy whose birthday it is like head of the mafia or mob or something of that sort. And he does it, and at the same time is creating this relationship with Javi. It's so funny. It's so good. Pedro and Nick's dynamic and chemistry is really, really good too. Like, it actually feels like this major fan meeting his idol. And it's so funny because I'd seen some interviews of Pedro being like, yeah, Nicolas Cage is one of my favorite actors of all time. I've seen a bunch of his movies, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you can tell his love for Nick Cage and his character and how he plays it. It's just so good. There's a lot that happens. I'm not going to lie. This movie like has a ton of stuff going on, and yet it's all good. Very little time was it was not really down or lully or anything like that. I was just like, pa, 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 the whole time. It was so good. So good. The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. Singing in the Rain was the next movie that I got here. This is a classic. It's a musical. I was pretty much bound to love it, regardless. Another 4 stars. This follows Don Lockwood, played by the magnificent Gene Kelly, by the way. And he is a famous silent movie actor. And his partner in all of these movies, because back in the day, you pretty much worked with the same person in like tons of movies. And his partner is Lena Lamont. Now, this takes place in this transition period when it went from silent movies to talkies. And Dawn and Lena are really struggling with that. Mainly, and I'm being seriously here, mainly because Lena's voice is the most irritating thing you've ever heard, and no one knows it. Like, all of the fans of these movies have never actually heard Lena speak, because 1, it's a silent movie, and 2, Dawn and co. make sure she doesn't talk to interviewers. Like, it's this serious. No, like, her voice is so irritating. So when he meets Kathy and hears her sing, he gets very excited and ends up getting her a job at the production company that he does movies for. And when him and Lena are working on a talkie and they decide, you know what, we're going to dub over Lena completely and we'll have Kathy do all of Lena's speaking. And then crazy things go on. This is a classic, and I'm glad I watched it. I sometimes am a little bit nervous about some of these older classics, but I don't know why, because I grew up on Sound of Music, and that is perfection. And I grew up on Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, which also is very good. You should watch it. It's problematic as heck, but so good. And this was no exception. This was really good. Gene Kelly did such a good job. Debbie Reynolds did such a good job. Like, it was just so fun and honestly just a blast. The chemistry was really fun. Even though Gene Kelly looks so much older, I think it was a large age gap. It doesn't really play that big into my enjoyment of the film. So, Singing in the Rain, super good. The music was fun. 4 stars. Would recommend watching, but really only if you like musicals. I think it's going to be harder to watch this if you don't like musicals. But that is Singing in the Rain. Number 30, The Truman Show, has 4 stars from me. So this movie actually had come up in a class of mine at school, and I thought, well, what better time? It came up in class, and if a movie comes up in class, it's hard for me to say no to it. So I watched it, not really knowing very briefly like the basics of the show or of the movie. So this follows Truman, believe it or not, I know. And he has no idea, but his entire life has been a TV show. It's been filmed since birth. And they have different people, like actors, playing the people in his life. Like his mom and dad in the show are actors. His wife in the show is an actor and is not actually married to Truman, which is a big thing when he finds out. So slowly he learns these things, and he's learning and seeing that things are not completely right or normal in his town, and that there are changes that he is skeptical about. And so the whole movie is just him finding out this stuff. I had a good time with it. It was fun to see Jim Carrey in not an inherently comedic role. Like, I often think about him because he's a comedian, like that's what he is. And this was a more serious role, but he added comedy to it because that just fit Truman's character, and I really liked that. Also, was I a lot of times don't think too deeply about movies because it's just an escape for me. But this was interesting because I saw almost this critique of humanity in our interest and curiosity of specifically reality TV, and just this need to watch others and what we are willing to do to get it. So, like the producers on the Truman Show, like not the movie, the show of Truman's life, they went through a lot to get what they needed to keep the show on the air and to keep people interested. And that was something that I wasn't expecting, but found really interesting. That's all I have for deep thoughts. I think for the rest of these movies, yeah, that's my final deep thought. Truman Show, recommend. We have Totally Killer, which is again a 4 star. This one was a jump for me because I'm not a horror and I'm not a thriller girly, and I think this would be considered a slasher. So it was a big jump for me to watch this to begin with. So this movie is really about the Sweet 16 killer. He was a killer in the 80s. He killed 16-year-olds, and he's gone dormant for 35 years when all of a sudden he returns and kills Jamie, our main girl's mom. And so this sends her through a spin because she had had a really rough conversation with her mom before she had gotten killed. And it all was just worse because her mom had escaped the Sweet 16 killer in the 80s when he first was around. So Jamie ends up trying to figure out who the killer is so that she can just get some closure almost, I guess. And the killer ends up finding her, and she runs away from him and enters a time machine that takes her back to 1987, also known as the year of the killing of the Sweet 16 killer. So she meets her parents as teenagers. She meets the people who were killed by the Sweet 16 killer. It's very Back to the Future coded, but if it were a slasher. So this was a fun surprise because I was expecting a lot more slasheriness or horrorness or thrillerness. And honestly, a lot of it was comedic, if I'm being completely honest. I did mainly watch it for Charlie Gillespie. I'm gonna be real, as well as Olivia Holt. Those two really put this movie on the map for me, but that doesn't matter. I think I predicted the killer every 5 minutes, so I want to say that I guessed the killer right, but I kept changing my thoughts. I do remember constantly being like, no, that's too obvious. But is it though? Or maybe it's this? I don't know. So I think I got it right, although I could be very wrong on that aspect. But yeah, that was totally killer. Super fun. If you like Back to the Future, definitely check it out because it has a very similar vibe to Back to the Future. Totally killer. Cinderella story. 4 stars. Don't regret it at all. So it's a Cinderella story. We follow Sam, who is the Cinderella in the story, and she lives with her stepmom and 2 stepsisters who are just the worst. She is basically a slave and works at the diner that was her dad's that her mom got or stepmom got because he didn't leave a will. So, big deals here. She has an online relationship, kind of, with someone called Nomad. And they met in a Princeton chat room because this is 2004 and there's chat rooms. Those don't exist anymore, basically. And they decide to meet at the Halloween dance. What do you know? She goes to the dance and it's Austin frickin' Ames, who is the football quarterback and probably the most popular guy at school. From there, it's Cinderella. Okay? 4 stars is not being generous. Okay? This is a purely good movie. This is fun times. It's funny. Jennifer Coolidge, anybody? It's just so good. And then you get Chad freaking Michael Murray. Okay? He may have been my first lip crush. I always say it's Zac Efron from High School Musical, but I think CMM was around before Zac Efron in my life. I truly do. So this movie will never be under a 4 for nostalgia and pure enjoyment purposes. And honestly, it could be higher. And I'm not exaggerating. Okay? Cinderella story, go watch it. And if you didn't like it, try again. Okay? Last but certainly not least, we have Wonka, which is the prequel to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. This, obviously, follows Willy Wonka, and this is his start in the chocolate selling biz. He comes to sell his chocolate after perfecting it for many, many years, but the local chocolatiers really don't like him and they don't like his innovative take on chocolate. And they basically try to put a stop to it. There are a lot of other parts to it, but I don't know how much of that is spoilers. But the main thing is the chocolate, clearly. This was tons of fun. I smiled throughout the movie. I had actually forgotten it had come out, and I was just looking for something to go see with a family friend of mine and noticed that this was out, and I'd actually totally forgotten about it. Anyways, I can understand where a lot of people get like the ick about it. I didn't and thoroughly enjoyed myself while watching it. And the music was good, okay? I don't want to hear anyone slander the music of Wonka and complain that they didn't know that Wonka was a musical because it wasn't marketed. It shouldn't have needed to be marketed as a musical because the movie that it's a prequel of was a musical, folks. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is a musical. Did no one else know this? Are me and my sister the only ones? I don't know. I loved it, had a fun time. The soundtrack is so good. I have it downloaded. I listened to it plenty. Wonka, 4 stars. Get over yourself. Even though you hate musicals, still so good. And those were my top movies of 2023. Thank you for sticking around. I'm sure this is going to be a long one. But yeah, those were all of my 4 to 5 star movies this year. I watched many more movies that are low that. I think my average rating is like 3.5. We have a lot of movies 3.5 stars this year. So if you want to check out my Letterboxd, I'm going to link it below in the description box. I'll also link my Instagram there if you want to go check me out there. I do sometimes post some vlogs, just fun little life updates when something exciting kind of happens. But yeah, subscribe, turn on the notifications, like this video if you did, like it if you didn't, comment below your thoughts on any of the movies and any of the movies that you loved that you watched this year. I'm hoping to eventually get a schedule figured out of what I want to post when. I can't guarantee that that will get stuck to simply because I'm a student who cares a lot about school. But anyways, for our first video, I am very excited about this. I'm excited to start this channel. This is purely for my enjoyment at this point. I don't really care about the number of subscribers I have or if I have that big an audience. I'm just excited about doing something that I'm really passionate kind of about, which is interesting to say that YouTube is something I'm passionate about. Okay. So yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time in Kira's Corner.